working together with shared values, but also shared interests, gives us a chance to shift also in this critical moment in the world where we are many ways going apart, to bring us together around a collective challenge and making the world better for each of our own populations, our own people.
Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for coming here today. I'm Michael Birnbaum. I cover foreign affairs at the Washington Post. I've also covered climate, and I was our bureau chief in Berlin, Moscow, and Brussels. I'm delighted to be joined today by Jennifer Morgan, Germany's envoy for climate issues and a state secretary in the foreign ministry. This summit today is going to take us all around the world. The continent, we're going to go continent by continent, exploring the impact of climate change and the solutions at hand. And it's just very exciting to start off in Europe with Germany. Jennifer Morgan, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, it's a real pleasure to be here. Thank you.
So all around the world, and including in Europe, we've seen record-breaking temperatures this year. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has said the era of global warming has ended, the era of global boiling has arrived. Have we entered a new climate era?
I think we've entered a new climate era. I think that we're seeing that the issues that the scientists told us about years ago that might come in the future are happening now. We're seeing in Germany 2 years ago a flood in the Ahr Valley that cost 30 billion euros. We're seeing floods that are happening still now in Central Europe, and everyone knows, probably someone or some village or some town that has experienced the heat, the droughts, the floods. It's not a tomorrow issue, it's a today issue. And so I think that the rubric that we need to invest today in order to avoid something tomorrow is fundamentally changed. We have to invest today because it's costing lives and economies today.
We're about 2.5 years into the war, Russia's war on Ukraine. Last time we spoke at an event like this, it was maybe half a year into that war. And a lot of people were fearing an energy crisis across Europe. This war has been very disruptive of energy supplies. When we spoke, I think we did it by Zoom, and you were in your office in Germany. It was the fall or winter, but anyway, it was cold, and the heat was limited in your office, in the foreign ministry. What did that experience teach you, of that first winter of energy rationing, teach you about Germany's energy reliance, and what's been the biggest lesson on energy policy for you of these last 2.5 years with the war in Ukraine?
Well, I think, first of all, the Russian war of aggression against the Ukraine has been a massive, horrific shock, and we are working every single day to bring peace. I think for our energy security, what we found are a few things. Number one is you should not make yourself dependent on fossil fuel imports. In 10 months, we phased out 55% of our imports, which came from Russia. Coal, gas, oil. And when we spoke, we were in the process of figuring out, okay, how do we get our gas reserves to be where they need to be? So there was a voluntary call to all citizens to set your thermostat at 19 degrees, which is pretty fine.
19 is, I'm just thinking Fahrenheit, that's 65, something like that?
Right, something like that. But I think most importantly, what it caused us to realize is that renewable energy and energy efficiency, they are our energy security. So what we did was, within a very short period, we passed the largest package of energy legislation in our history. We set an 80% goal for renewable energy by 2030. We set strong policies on energy efficiency. Obviously, we also needed to diversify our gas. Our gas imports are down from before the war of aggression began. And I think this ability to, or forced ability to think about energy security with renewables, economic security, and climate security together, I think is a watershed in a way. And we, in a way, have been able to fill our reserves. We are, I mean, it's a tremendous tribute to all German European citizens. So our reserves are full. We're at 60% renewables now in our grid, 400,000 new jobs. And we had an increase of 64% investment in renewables last year. That's 37 billion euros. So through this shock, we've become more resilient. And I would say, from a climate perspective, our emissions are going down. So that's tremendous lessons. I think if you look at the list of all of the measures that needed to be taken to get there, also very reliable grid, prices are back down from before the war, thanks to renewable energy, when the war started. Then you can really see with determination and urgency, you can do it.
Germany, of course, is still highly reliant on fossil fuels, particularly dependent on coal. I think it's still supplying about a third of Germany's electricity. I know it's diminishing, but it's about twice the average of the European Union. Can you tell us a little bit about that balance between environmental goals and Germany's immediate energy needs? Clearly, also, Germany's energy picture has become a subject in the American political debate.
Yeah.
Former President Donald Trump mentioned it a couple times in the debate recently with Kamala Harris. Tell us a little bit about that balance.
Sure thing. No, I think beyond this kind of initial package on renewables that we scaled up, Germany's been on a pathway for some time to have a just energy transition away from coal. So we have the aim to phase out coal by 2030. And we're making good progress on that. I think we took 15 more plants off at the beginning of this year. And there's been a specific agreement with some of the states in Western Germany for that. In Eastern Germany, that's still being discussed. But because of the emissions trading system in Europe and the pricing of carbon, then coal is just not economic anymore. And renewables is so cheap that it's overtaking, it's able to fill all those demands. Germany also has phased out nuclear power. So I think the situation is, number one, focus in on the just part of the energy transition, which we've been doing. So bringing together labor unions, business, states, environmental activists, scientists to say, okay, how do we do this kind of a phase out, making sure that people have opportunities if the coal is being phased out, and there's new investment, as I mentioned, going into renewables, looking that those go into those states and those areas where coal was before, and really scaling up the efficiency and renewables piece. So I think we are still learning a huge amount, and there's more to be done. I think the other piece that's quite important that gets forgotten is the grid. Like everywhere I go around the world, it's about the grid. So what we've learned in Germany and what we're doing is to have a flexible smart grid, so that if you have, we have days with 100% renewables now in our grid, but the average is now about 60. That it can be moved around, that you can be looking at focusing what your capacity, what's needed, and have that kind of a flexible grid within a European grid. Of course, we are nestled inside of Europe on all of that, and making sure those investments are happening. It's something that we find other countries are quite interested in, because we're all trying to have economic prosperity, energy security, and climate security at the same time.
You mentioned nuclear.
Yep.
Some of your neighbors, particularly France, but others as well, have taken a very different approach to nuclear and included it as more of a cornerstone in their move toward emissions-free energy. Germany, on the other hand, as you said, has been phasing out its nuclear plants. Even after the war in Ukraine, it's temporarily at least made Germany more dependent on carbon, fossil fuels. Was it a mistake to phase out, to sort of hold to that timeline? Should you have done it differently, or are you excited still about that aspect of the climate plans?
Still determined, excited. The nuclear phase-out has happened. There's no
Yes.
going back. When you start decommissioning nuclear power plants, talk to the utilities who are doing it. It's not an easy thing to go back on. And it's an issue where German society, having lived through Chernobyl, having seen what happened with Fukushima, having a highly industrialized country like Japan, that's a risk that our citizens didn't want to continue having. So it actually has, in a way, the renewables increase is the key story there. The LNG is coming in, but we have a 2045 climate neutrality law. So that means everything needs to be going down to climate neutrality by that 2045. So a lot of it's been replaced by renewables. I think we also just see, if you look at the debate right now that's happening, if you want to move fast, if you want to move cheaply, you go renewable. This is, nuclear, if you're building new nuclear, takes a lot of time, a lot of investment, a lot of risk. So that's why when we're working with our partners internationally, they're quite interested because of the jobs, because of the energy security, because of the quickness, especially for countries that are trying to have energy access, to go into renewables. And that, we think, also is the most quick way to bring down emissions around the world, and we need that quick action now, as we heard in the video.
I want to ask you about the politics of the work that you're doing and that Germany is doing. When the German coalition came to power a couple of years ago, of course, the Greens are part of the coalition. Your boss, Annalena Baerbock, is a Green, holds the foreign ministry. Her colleague holds the economy ministry. These are key ministries in Germany and key aspects of German policy. The coalition is not very popular right now, and there's been a lot of back and forth, specifically about the costs to citizens of the climate transition that you're making. So I wanted to ask how you balance that challenge of popularity, of where citizens want to be, of your ability to stay in office to carry out the policies that you want to carry out, when sometimes there is public backlash and sort of pressure on what you're doing. How do you manage that? And of course, just yesterday, there was an election in the region surrounding Berlin-Brandenburg in which the Greens did not make the cut for the regional parliament. So that's bad news for the Green Party.
I think the way that we manage, or I think it's a process of constant learning and engagement. So I think the clarity of the purpose needs to be both on the climate, but also on social justice and social issues. So I would bring that into my energy, climate, and economic security. And I think one of the key things that we have learned as we've gone through, is the importance of engagement of citizens actually in the discussion around policy making, and particularly to ensure that there's an understanding that if a policy is coming in, how particularly lower income households are going to be kept whole and not have to pay any extra costs. That was always the intent, right, of all of the different policies that have brought in. But I think if one doesn't communicate that very actively, number one, it can get lost in the discussion. Number two, if I may, I think there are those that will take that and use the uncertainty and to breed fear and try and divide society. And we actually, climate action can bring society together. Democracy is a foundation of our society, and we need that kind of participation. So I think active engagement of citizens in our democracy and our decision making is something that we've worked to double down on. And I think, it's challenging. It's challenging if you take a clear leadership stance and you understand you have a short period of time in the middle of a climate crisis to move things forward, but you have to both move forward quickly and move forward together.
Moving forward together, let's talk about transatlanticism and the U.S.-Germany relationship or U.S.-Europe relationship. President Biden's, one of his key climate achievements has been the Inflation Reduction Act that channeled an awful lot of money toward green initiatives here in the United States. Europe has complained that it did so at the expense of European industry. It's sort of luring European industry here and disadvantaging Europe's industries. I'm curious, I mean, that is quite some time ago now. Where does that stand? Are you still as aggravated with the United States or with the Biden administration as you were a couple of years ago when it passed? There was a lot of frustration at the time. Have you managed to resolve some of those differences?
I think there were two senses when that got passed. Number one was excellent that the United States is moving forward on climate change, right? And that is needed. The U.S. is the large historical emitter around the world, so go. Let's go. Let's move forward together. I think the approach now of Europe, and you may have seen this after the latest election from President von der Leyen, is to say, we have pretty good conditions for this as well, but we also need to improve in our competitiveness. We see what's happening here. We see what's happening in China. So therefore, you see the Green Deal continuing and in a way being enveloped into economic policy of Europe. And you now see a clean industrial deal coming. Top priority, first 100 days of President von der Leyen's new commission, which will be in place in a couple of months. You know, have to go through hearings, et cetera. Very strong climate team there. And just to make Europe even more fit for purpose. There's areas, on innovation, on bringing down bureaucracy, on all of those things. So I think it's really a response of, okay, let's go. We need to do this all together. We can bring forward decarbonization and economic growth at once, also in these kinds of sectors.
I'm mindful of the clock here. I'm a little frustrated because I want to ask you so many more questions. But maybe just a last one. We're 2 months out, or a few months out from COP, 2 months. And the next one in Baku. Are you optimistic about how that's going to turn out? And I'm also curious how you're planning to manage the outcome of the US election. Of course, COP will be right after our results, and you'll know what's coming in terms of US policy. How are you feeling right now?
I mean, I'm optimistic on the sense that when I travel in Germany and actually travel around the world, I was in South Africa 2 weeks ago, I was in Canada last week, I see how much is happening on the ground to transition away from fossil fuels, to triple renewables and double efficiency like we said last year and agreed last year. Yes, there are actors that are trying to hold us back, but that's hard to do on an economy that is moving in that direction. So I think there still will be, of course, big debates about that, but I think at this COP you'll see it's really about getting it moving, like getting the rules to move forward to really unleash that even more. It's unstoppable, but the pace and scale of change needs to move. We need to figure out how we're going to work together on finance, investment. We need to get the funds moving into developing countries. We need to negotiate a new collective goal for financing for all countries. And on that one, we will continue to take the lead as the EU, 60% of climate finance. We need the United States. But we also need other countries to come in and help out get those funds to the most vulnerable. And of course, there's uncertainty. There's uncertainty because of the US election, the US playing such a key role. But Europe is quite stable in how we're moving forward. We have so many partnerships now with countries that I think see the clean energy transition in their interests. And that's where we will double down and focus. We can maybe just encourage whichever administration comes in. Renewables efficiency, good business, good economy, jobs. Oh, and by the way, it helps us respond to the climate crisis, which is, one of the largest security threats we're facing today.
Jennifer Morgan, thank you so much for your time. This has been a fascinating conversation. Jennifer Morgan, Germany's climate envoy, state secretary at the German Foreign Ministry. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And please stay with us. My colleague Bina will be up next with IMF Managing Director Kristina Georgieva. Thanks a lot.